And as Jim said, my name is Stechschulte. I am a CPA in the state of Ohio. You can look me up on the State Board of Accountancy. And that is a long last name. You know, it really is. It's tough to spell, but I'm proud of it. And I'm not afraid to use it. So, you know, it's funny. What we're going to talk about today is the Article 5 process around the Convention of States and our organization, the Convention of States Project. So this is the obvious slide. This is the one that we can all agree on, I believe. Washington, D.C. is out of control and will not relinquish power. Yeah, I'm hearing a lot. Yes, that's right. Absolutely. So that is the problem. And sometimes it's tough because you'll hear, well, we can't do this or we can't do that. And what I want to talk about today is something we can do. So it's all about can. And that is using Article 5, the second methodology for a convention of the states. The founders gave us this solution in the Constitution. So let's talk a little bit about that. I'm sure this is going to be reviewed for a lot of folks, which is great. And that's what's wonderful. You know, what's funny is, I would tell a little story. As I go around the state, I talk to many, many groups. And I always say this to folks. I say, the thing is, everybody, there are thousands of you around this state, just this state alone. So that should give us happiness, that should give us motivation, because there are a lot of you folks like that. So I commend every one of you for coming out today and spending part of your Saturday in this event. So let's talk about it. There are two methods to propose amendments to the Constitution. We know this, right? The first process is amendments are proposed by 2/3 of Congress. If they vote on those and pass them, then they're ratified either by 3/4 of the state legislatures or 3/4 of the states by convention. And the amendment itself tells us whether it's going to be a convention or legislature. And this has happened, 27 times it's been successful. But I guess I would like to get a little bit of a trivia question here. And I'm sure there are folks who know this. How many amendments were ever proposed by Congress in the history of this country since the Constitution was formed? How many amendments? Does anybody know? Rough figure. 16? Okay, a little bit more than that. Do you believe 11,000? 11,000. I didn't know that until I started getting part of this organization. My point to that is 27 out of 11,000. I know there's mathematicians in here. That is not a high probability that things are going to go through. And the founders put that in purpose. That they didn't want us to just willy-nilly go through this process. So that's the first process. And in Article 5, the second process is that amendments can be proposed by a convention of the states under Article 5. I say that emphatically because that's the key here. It's under Article 5 of the Constitution. And it's called at the request of 2/3 of the state legislatures. Now, one more trivia. I think this is my last trivia for the day. How many applications, how many times have states said we would like to do this process in the history of this country?
475.
That's correct. 400, over 400. Thank you. Now, 475, and if we know what 2/3 of 50 is, now I'm a CPA, I'm not going to give you all the math, obviously that's 34. Why have we not ever had one of these conventions? Because of aggregation. Because part of the process is that the states have to ask for the same agenda, the same scope. So otherwise we'd have had over 10 of them, if my math is right. Now, it's the same process, though, on the right-hand side. It's either ratified by 3/4 of the state legislatures or ratified by conventions of 3/4 of the states. So that's exactly the same. The only difference here is the front. Who's proposing? And that's a key word, proposing, because nothing's ratified until it goes through the process. Now, when we talk about this process, I mentioned aggregation. Now, the first process, 34 states have to submit applications. Now, part of the Convention of States project here is that we're asking for, and I underline, highlight there, under Article 5 of the Constitution. we're asking for, and our key language in this resolution, it's one page, not 1,200. Now that's good already, right? It says, Section 1, the legislature of the state of. Now it's blank because this Convention of States project is working on this in several states to avoid aggregation using the same key operative language in Section 1. Applies to Congress under the provisions of Article 5 of the Constitution. That's key. Under the provisions. There's nothing simpler. It's just that simple. For the calling of a convention limited to proposing amendments. Again, words mean things. That's the key. That impose, number one, any amendment that would impose fiscal restraints on the federal government. Number two, anything that would limit the terms of office of federal officials and members of Congress. And number three, any amendment that would limit the power and jurisdiction of the federal government. So the concept here is that the states ask for this convention, and they willingly and agree that they will be limited to only amendments that cover in these areas. So freedom of speech, not in here. Freedom of the press, not in here. 10th Amendment, not in here. It's not germane to the meeting. Now the key on this is, if you think about all the precedent for these type of multi-state, multi-sovereign entities, is that the agenda is set beforehand. When we talk about multinational agreements or multinational meetings, which this is what this is, it's a meeting for a specific purpose, there's always an agenda. Who's going to go to a meeting that doesn't have an agenda? And that agenda covers what is happening. That's the precedent. So it's not, hey, we said we're only going to do these things, but we'll do whatever we want. It just flies in the face of common sense. Now, the key on this is, the Congress is required, we know that through Federalist 85, that shall means must. And then commissioners, or delegates, but technically they're commissioners, because they are commissioned by the state. They act in agency for the state, like your insurance agent. My dad was an insurance agent for 26 years. He had to act upon the best interest of his clients. And sometimes they left him, sometimes they came back. All because they were part of agency. Now, Indiana has passed some statutes already that talk about what the delegates can and cannot do. They include they can't be federal office holders. They must obey the Indiana State Legislature's instructions, must swear an oath to that, and if they don't obey, then they can be subject to felony charges. Now again, someone can say, well, they're going to just do what they want anyway. Well, they have to swear an oath, just like other folks have to do. I know there's not everybody always swears an oath and means it, but they do have to do that. And they can be subject to those felony charges. And then, again, the precedent is always that in these multi-sovereign entities, which a state in this particular case under Article 5, being a sovereign entity under the Constitution, one vote per state delegation. Now the key here is this next slide. Proposed amendments that come out of the convention, they're passed by the convention, are sent to the states for ratification. If, I read, only if 38 states ratify, just like Congress will do it, the same concept, the proposed amendments become part of the Constitution. That's key, and that is something that we don't always hear from opponents of this process, is that they don't, the subject of ratification doesn't always come up. And that's important, because if we have 50 states, which we do, and we need 3/4 of them, they 3/4 have to say yes, so only 12 can say no. And if the House says no and the Senate says yes in a state, that is a no. So technically, you only have to have one House in 13 different states to say no. So let's play out a scenario. The repeal of the Second Amendment. Very popular, right? No, it's not. Not to me either. Well, let's play the scenario out, that there is some delegates who will not obey instructions from their state, or they just think that we should do a repeal of the Second Amendment. First hurdle is, it has to get over, is that it has to be germane to the subject matter. Imposing fiscal restraints, limiting the power and jurisdiction of the federal government, and imposing term limits, repealing the Second Amendment doesn't fall under those. But let's say it gets past those. Somebody nefariously figures it out. Then it has to go through the convention. It has to be signed by a majority or better from the delegations. I don't know if that will happen, but let's say it does. Then we go through the process, then it's sent to the states for ratification. So remember, we're trying to repeal the Second Amendment. The states get a hold of it now. They say, do we want it? Do we not want it? And they decide individually. So, think about it. You have to have 13 states to defeat it. And in my mind, let's think about the states that might defeat it. Look at this group. Keep going. Just going around the map. Arkansas, Louisiana, Texas, Oklahoma, Missouri. Would they want a repeal of the Second Amendment in this scenario? And now I think we're getting a little bit past 13. Now again, we can discuss whether you think one state's going to pass it or not. There's 24. Now again, people might say, well, they won't ratify it this way. But it's in the plain language of Article 5 that they are subject to ratification. And it wouldn't make, again, doesn't pass the sniff test. Why would you say Congress, if it starts in Congress, it goes one way, but if it starts in the states, it goes another way? There was no precedent, there's no legal activity that says that was the intention in any respect. It's just where it starts. So this is key to this whole process. And a lot of times, what you'll see is organizations will say that we've never been for this. This process is not good. Never been for it. In fact, a lot of times we run into people who are part of the John Birch Society. They'll say, we're not going to do this. We've never been for this. But it's interesting. Now, can anybody read that? No, I'm teasing. This is the congressional record of the House from October 9th, 1975, page 326, 36, in case you have that book in front of you. I'm teasing. I'm sure you don't. The point is, there's an area highlighted in red, and I'm going to commit the cardinal sin of presenting. I'm going to read the slide. I'm going to make it bigger and read the slide. This was a discussion, a question posed to Larry McDonald, who was a representative from Georgia and was a president of the John Birch Society. How are you going to get the Liberty Amendment passed? The Liberty Amendment was back in the 70s. It said that the federal government can only engage in activities that are stated in the Constitution. Not necessarily a bad amendment. How are we going to get it passed? The 5th article prescribes 2 valid methods, proposed by 2/3 of both houses of Congress, or the legislatures, 2/3 of the several states. And then in either case, they become part of the Constitution with 3/4, 38 states, ratified. So this is a president of the John Birch Society saying there are 2 valid methods. Now, let's talk about our organization, the Convention of States Project, what we're about. As Jim said, I'm the state director here in Ohio for this project. As Jim, and kudos to the organization, they aren't paid a salary. Neither are we. I get 0. All our district captains get 0. All the people who are helping us get 0. This is a completely volunteer effort on the states. We have an organization in Virginia, and they're there to kind of coordinate the whole thing. So what we're simply trying to do, and again, simply is the key, we're asking to the states to call for a convention, limited to the amendments I mentioned before. That's one goal. Number 2, we're trying to build a strong network of grassroots support for this process and to help educate and help people understand what has come out of the convention when it happens. And it's an all-volunteer force in the states, as I mentioned, and we build a political operation in a minimum of 40 states. We've hit that goal. We're working on trying to get the legislatures of 34 states. Our organization is led by 2 men, Mark Meckler, co-founder of the Tea Party Patriots, probably seen him on television a few times, and Michael Ferris, founder of the Homeschool Legal Defense Association, who has 30 years of grassroots leadership in all 50 states, and basically was very responsible for a couple things. homeschooling being above board and legal in this country, and from the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. He actually named that. So it's a good man, very good man, and a man who has successfully argued an Article 5 case in front of the Supreme Court. Pretty good credentials in my book. I think you would agree. What's funny is, though, folks will talk about, well, there's backing by different organizations, you have to follow the money. Follow the money, and that is important. As a CPA, I will tell you, you always follow the money trail, you're right. So let's do that. Let's follow the money trail. This is an article from March 31st on the Washington Examiner. The headline is Soros and Birchers Fight Constitutional Fix to Limit Obama in Congress, and they mean George Soros. Just so happens in Montana, our organization found out that the Soros-backed Montana Budget and Policy Center was sending out a memo to the state legislators in Montana saying, don't ask the Convention of Statespeople any questions, don't go for this, and only ask the John Birch Society these questions. So when someone says, well, there's a lot of background, the co-founder of the Tea Party Patriots, the man who named the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. Montana Budget and Policy Center, Soros-backed, not by me. Whoa, now I'm really talking loud. Not by me, but by the Washington Examiner, and that was dated March 31st of this year, so it's not an old article like 1975. So just keep that in mind. Our momentum is building. We have passed it in about a year and a half. We passed in Georgia, Alaska, and Florida. We have sponsors in over 35 states, including Ohio. Senator Bill Coley here in this area is agreed to be our sponsor. In Arkansas, Missouri, and Arizona, we have passed in one chamber. Again, remember, the state organizations are volunteers, not paid political experienced folks. This is grassroots. The Assembly of State Legislatures, a group of both sides of the aisle, state legislators working together to talk about how a convention may be set up. Now the key is, of course, the convention itself would vote on its rules, but they're trying to set up rules, and you can go on C-SPAN through a link on their website that I have here and watch their proceedings. They're open. It's an open book. They're not hiding in the shadows. In Ohio, we had 390 volunteers and supporters about a year ago, a little over a year ago. As of today, we got 9,282, so momentum is building. We have petitions that are signed from all 99 legislative representative districts. And nationwide, we have them from 95% of all districts. Now, the key is, I think, for this whole process is that it's a flat organization. State director, we have a legislative liaison, coalitions directors, and then district captains. Folks locally who are point people, they're volunteers, they're activists who want to help out with the process. And we started pretty much with myself and a couple other folks about a year ago. Now we have a few more. We have about 34 around the state. We're still looking for more. The district captains, like I said, we have about 34. Their job is to educate and help recruit 100 volunteers per district. We're at about 93, so we're getting there. Getting there, but we're still working to help. And we encourage everyone to be a part of it. And the key is, if you're going to be a part of it, I want you to be a part of it even if you really want to understand what it's all about. And you say, well, wait a minute, we want to make sure of this. Ask those questions. Please do. Because if I can't answer it, I'll go right to the national office and ask them. And I can tell you that the folks who are involved in our organization will attest that we are not trying to hide things. This is an organization where if you have questions, we want those questions. We want you to help educate your circles. And hey, I'd love you to become a district captain for our organization. That's how you can, as I mentioned earlier, you can help. So that's key. Now this is a snap of our website. Right there probably is sign the petition. If you sign the petition, we will not, and I guarantee this, I've been in this organization for a year and a half, we will not sell it to other organizations under any circumstances. Secondly, we will not inundate you with emails every other day. I control that, so I tell you, we're not going to do that. We will give you updates on what's going on, but we're not here to just raise money from you. I think you haven't seen the word donate yet. We would love that to the organization, but it's all about your time, your valuable time. That's what we're asking for. And your education. Now, what's funny about this is, I think the interesting part about this whole process is the fact that when sometimes as being part of this organization, as we go around, folks talk about things, and the arguments really center around fear of the process, fear of the uncertainty. It's never been done. Has this been done before? No, it hasn't been done. Well, I can tell you, 90 miles up the road, there's a small town where a young man, over 40 years ago, did something that no human had ever done before. And I'm certain that Mr. Armstrong from Wapakoneta was told, this has never been done before. Do you surely want to do this? But he didn't. So that's important. And doubt. We hear that, well, there was problems with the way the Constitution was put together. Was it part of a runaway convention? The logic would be then that process created an illegal document. But at the same time, we should follow that document, the folks will say. Follow the document that was illegally set up. But only selectively. Don't do Article 5 of the second methodology. So it's kind of selective following of the Constitution. We already have a president who selectively follows the Constitution. Now, I contend to you that the United States was not built using fear, uncertainty, and doubt. The United States did not become the greatest country in the history of the world through fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And it's not going to be saved with fear, uncertainty, and doubt arguments. In contrast, what we're offering is for you to come with us and really keep everybody in line. It's going to take courage. A man once said this, there are no easy answers, but there are simple answers. It's a simple process, really. We must have the courage to do what's right. As Reagan said, we are saying, let's have the courage to do this process. Let's have the conviction. We have folks in our room today that are district captains. And they're mothers and brothers, fathers and sons, husbands and wives, daughters and mothers, aunts and uncles. In fact, what they are is Ohio. We have people from all over the state, and they're a wonderful group of people. They have conviction. So in addition to courage, we're talking about conviction. And thirdly, it's going to take determination. All of you in this room are the type of people, you are the people that should keep our state representatives, state legislators from this state and other states in line through this process. This is what Jim's organization is doing. This is what the Cincinnati Tea Party and Ann's group is doing. This is going to be key to the process. So it's going to be about courage, conviction, and determination. And I want to end on this note. Back in 1978, the first non-Italian pope was elected. Pope St. John Paul II. And everybody, you know, that communism was on the rise. A lot of people said, we have to live with communism at times. We just have to live together, find a way. Because there was a lot of fear. There really was. And the thing is, the Pope, when he came out, you know, he comes out after the white smoke is brought up, they dress him, and they say, okay, he's coming out to the portico from the Vatican. What were the first 3 words that the Pope said? That's what I want to leave you with. Be not afraid. The back of his book, Crossing the Threshold of Hope, it says, be not afraid. Now, in the last couple of minutes here, I see one of our district captains here, Tony. I want to take a second here, just as an example of our volunteers. Tony, could you come up? I'd like to just tell me a little bit about why you are part of the convention. We've got about a couple minutes, that's it. So thank you, go ahead.
First of all, I'd like to thank all of you that are participating in the Convention of States. Some of you have already volunteered. I want you to know that what you're doing makes a difference. I can attest to that because I've been in Columbus and I've delivered information to our representatives, and it makes a difference. You are the strength of this organization. For those of you that are undecided, I hope you will come to the same decision that I have come to on this. Steve has mentioned to you a number of things, a number of reasons why this process is what is needed now. We're all in agreement. We need to move now. We've had too much progressivism too long. It's been 114 years. So I hope you'll come to the same conclusion that I've come to, and that is this. There is no viable alternative plan that exists now that will accomplish what we are going to accomplish. And we're not going to do it in 2025. We're going to do it within a year or so. So, what were the things that made me commit to this? First of all, the strategy and the plan. There is a strategy, there is a plan to our project. There is an organization. He's told you that organization is flat. Those of you in business know a flat organization is responsive. And that's what we have. Okay. We have clear objectives. He stated those 3 objectives on what we feel needs to be accomplished with those amendments. Those are clear. All the states are following it exactly. Competency. He mentioned 2 of our leaders. Okay? Now, I would like to say some of the district captains, I respect every one of them. They bring something to the table that I don't have. I bring something to the table that they don't have. We work as a team. That team is right now down at the convention center at the Homeschool Midwest Convention, okay, telling people about our project. Okay, Mark Meckler, 1 million people in 3 months. I think that's an accomplishment. And that's what he was able to do with the Tea Party Patriots. Michael Ferris, founded and is chancellor of Patrick Henry College. As already mentioned, he and a team wrote the legislation for the Religious Freedom Restoration Act that was passed 97-3, I think, in the Senate. What else? Obviously, he is and continues to be the head of the Homeschool Legal Defense Association. He's active in it. These men walk the walk, and that's what I am going to follow. I've had it with the Wilsonian progressivism. That cancer that started in 1901 culminated in my mind when Wilson said, if you wish to understand the real Declaration of Independence, do not repeat the preface. In 1911, Woodrow Wilson abolished our Declaration of Independence, and I'm not going to put up with it. I thank you so much. I would love to meet each and every one of you in the back after this lecture is over. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.